Hello everyone! I'm so glad that you joined me tonight. I have a lot to talk about, and I'm very glad that you've decided to join me. Now, thanks to a little help from Alan, who's a computer wizard, we'll be getting things live and available afterwards via our internal Masquerade-friendly media channel. I'd like to say hello to everyone who's decided to show up, from Mr. David Archer, Primogen, to Dorleens, unaligned Ravnos, leader of their little secret militia, as it's called. It's a wonderful evening in Montreal. It's warm and rainy, although we had a sugar dusting of snow earlier, and I have a lot to talk about regarding the goings-on in New York. Now, I'm going to guess, as more and more people are piling onto this channel, that you can probably hear me pretty well. Can you hear me? Good, good. So, you're probably wondering what's going on in New York. To give you some background, New York is primarily ruled over by Prince Ryder. He's an elder Assamite vizier and former pirate king. Up until a year ago, he was a member of the Anarch movement. However, in addition to that, there is a small portion of New York which is currently going to be under Anarch control. That's the neighborhood of Brooklyn, which is going to be a small but scrappy free state. That's going to be under the control of Advocate Youngblood. She's an elder of the Ventru. She's specifically of the Cardos lineage. Apparently the Sabbat didn't really like the idea of sharing Brooklyn with the Anarchs, and while the Blood Accord keeps them from making trouble with the Camarilla, they made it abundantly clear that they're going to do everything in their power to murder every single Anarch resident in the Free State of Brooklyn. So that's a dream in danger of dying in short notice. Now, because our hands are tied by the blood accords, we of the Camarilla can do very little to help. I'm very good friends with Prince Ryder and also the Prince of Boston as a matter of having linked cities. Montreal, Boston, and New York have always had a strong relationship. But there's one thing that we can do, and this is very important. The Anarchs really don't receive any protection from this attack, and our hands are tied, but I can say from personal experience, as the Prince of Montreal, excepting Laval, that any area that involves fighting the miscellaneous forces of the Sabbat rapidly becomes a dead zone full of unreasonable carnage. The Masquerade is in peril. It falls upon you, I mean you, the viewer, if you're of the Camarilla, to come to the aid of Prince Ryder with your influence to provide aid, to prevent the whole thing from cracking open and revealing our kind. As two armies clash in Brooklyn, we're in grave danger of this spilling over. It's going to draw hunters from miles around, blood in the water. Yes, these little fireside chats, as my harpy has been calling them, function somewhat similar to my evening levees. If you're invited to participate, you're perfectly welcome to comment or provide any information you'd like to. I'd like to say a special hello to Elder Zacchaeus. I carry his favor, and I'm particularly proud of this. Although the Assamites are the newest addition to the tower, they are among the best, and we're deeply grateful to have them. I will repeat this. New York needs you. We need you. Our kind needs you. We are in grave danger. In addition to this small issue of everyone being revealed because there's a war going on, there is considerable intelligence indicating that apostate Sabbat are taking advantage of this activity, and that there are weaponized werewolves in the hands of the Sabbat. It is generally agreed that the weaponized werewolves are not covered by the blood accords and may be ravaging through the streets of New York. The situation is desperate. Kindred are streaming in from across the continent. Prince Ryder has put out a call for arms, blood, and influence. If this is something you have available, know that you will be glorified within the Camarilla. If you are an Anarch, I of course advise you to speak immediately with Advocate Youngblood. If you are unaligned, you may take whichever path you feel is necessary. If this was just a small fight over territory, we could just ignore it. And well, I'm very confident the Anarchs have a number of new and intriguing battle tactics. There are some things that put everyone in peril. Now, I'm going to be answering questions throughout all this, so if you're looking for any information, I'll be happy to give it to you. We've already had a few volunteers answer the call and say that they're willing to go. Mr. Elijah Stone of Clan Ventru, resident of Kelowna of the Asher lineage, has already put himself down to lend his rather extensive skill in combat to the Prince. Dr. David Archer, Primogen of Boston, that is Ventru Primogen, will be attending to lend his skill with influence. I have dispatched other individuals who are concerned about this. For example, Mr. von Stratton has expressed a strong desire to add his influence to the growing pool of Ventru. Now, the other advantage of the Ventru taking an interest in this is that it thoroughly extends the tactics that other clans may take in defending the Prince and in the holdings of New York. We can't guarantee that the Sabbat will understand limitations and not violate, if not the blood accords, any standards for the Masquerade, leaving the entire place a barren wasteland for our kind, patrolled by hunters. For that's the state that they left Montreal in. We have a serious hunter problem with much difficulty in hunting and many territories virtually unusable due to the presence of watchful eyes. If you care about the Masquerade and you have any influence or any martial skill, New York is where you need to be. I'll be posting links so that you can figure out the precise proxies shortly. I'll also go over the guidelines from the VST for what he is and isn't accepting as far as why you want to participate. Well, this is a general call to arms, and this is something that you can participate in with your characters. It's also something where we don't want to cause the poor VST's head to explode when 300 people all send in their requests just because. So you want to have a good RP reason why you're showing up, because you want to be able to justify, why is my character here? Anyway, I deeply appreciate your attention on this matter. It's an issue of extreme urgency, and if we don't act now, I don't know what's going to become of our kind. Usually I prefer a much lighter little message, maybe the goings-on or the fashions, but tonight I do find myself speaking about such a serious issue. Particular to the more mercantile of our kind, you might be interested to know about the weaponized werewolves. While amongst our kind, it's generally advised not to bother the megafauna native to our world, due to the aforementioned tendency for werewolves to rip your arms and legs off and then beat you into torpor with them, whilst shouting something about worms? I don't know. I don't understand moon beasts. They're completely incomprehensible. But if you're put into an opportunity where you can ethically fight the moon beasts without considering yourself engaging in an act of genocide, do keep in mind that their blood is one of the most potent drugs known to our kind. It's a powerful stimulant with a high value. So if you happen to be going to New York and you happen to incapacitate or kill one of these moon beasts, do think about your local brokers and the value that this may give you in boons. Additionally, I understand that Tremere are frequently looking for pelts, claws, and teeth for their own research into the supernatural, and I'm sure that you could find a buyer for any of these. I know there was quite the fashion for werewolf pelts. Well, that was back in 1862. It was the thing to have a cape made of pure werewolf. Not so fashionable these days. See, we already have a buyer for this werewolf blood. Dr. David Archer, Primogen of Boston and Ventru medical expert, has asked if persons tangle with the werewolves to provide him samples of their vitae for our research capacity. Maybe he'll figure out a way of reverse engineering it. My, that would be quite the party. If you thought cocaine was potent. Imagine using their blood. So, to recap, for those of you who are coming in later, New York needs your aid. The Camarilla needs you, the Anarchs need you. Each have their own part to play, for, well, we of the Camarilla cannot violate the blood accords and must keep to our treaty. There are things that you must do to protect all our kind. There is no way that a clash in the streets is going to go completely unnoticed. And again, for those of you who are on the fence and not entirely motivated by altruism, I can put you in touch with Prince Ryder, who will be happy to discuss the possibility of boons and status for yourself. If you've ever wanted to be able to get direct contact with an elder prince and his appreciation and respect, now is the time to make a name for yourself. I'm thinking in particular for the neonates who are thinking not necessarily what they'll do in the next 50 years, but their growth within the next, perhaps, century. This is in your strong interests. There is always an opportunity for you to profit, and as an elder, it's always been my business to make sure that the neonates can experience some measure of growth. This is entirely selfish on my part. If we don't provide you avenues and opportunities to prove yourselves, this rapidly leads to other issues that no elder wants to experience. But this particular sort of battle is one of those rare moments when you're not stepping on anybody's toes to come in and help. If you're an Anarch, you can speak to Youngblood, and I know under her competent leadership, she has work for virtually any sort of Anarch and working teams that can put you in active control of the streets. But if you're a member of the Camarilla and you don't want to see the Masquerade cracked wide open because the Sabbat and the Anarchs decided that it was necessary to have a rumble in Brooklyn, well, I can't say I really blame the Anarchs for that. It's more that they finally got themselves a homeland after a century of negotiations and a change in praxis from that Toreador prince to Prince Ryder, who, long may he reign, due to his long experience with the movement, is entirely willing to work with Advocate Youngblood in affirming her place within the Edict of Succession. Primogen Archer brings up a very valid point. One of the groups that is going to suffer in this is the humans themselves. The poor mortals in the middle of this will also need protection. So that's another very good influence use. I'm muddling my words tonight. Another good use for those of you with influence to step in. Well, that's wonderful. If you're following along with the comments, there's already interested people in New York stepping in to make sure that while you're coming in to help, you'll be given housing as well. Now, the other thing that New York is in desperate need of, and this is something that both the Anarchs and the Camarilla have asked for, is blood. There is currently a blood shortage due to some rather clever work by the hunters of New York. They figured out a way to radioactively tag much of the blood supply using common over-the-counter medications. And while there's an effort to contain and cleanse this situation, and given maybe a year or two, the blood supply should be clean again, clean blood, particularly from ethical sources that do not involve damage, is something that the combatants of both the Camarilla and the Anarchs are going to need. So if you happen to have any surplus herd and the means to move blood into New York, this is something where both Advocate Youngblood will probably pay highly for it, as will the Prince of New York. To quote Advocate Youngblood, "A hungry vampire knows no sect, and the last thing we need is an overstressed combatant going nuts in the streets." Now, this is going to be a very short little broadcast, although it's been a very productive one talking about New York. And the other thing I need to bring up is, what the Abyss? Now, I don't have a lot of information about this, but apparently there's something called an Abyssal Storm going on right now. This so-called Abyssal Storm apparently involves damage to the void, which I don't really understand. I'm not a Lasombra, and I couldn't possibly comprehend the nature of what's going on. But this hole in the void, which my harpy has dubbed the Abyss Hole, leaks straight into the land of the dead, which has been causing certain supernatural activity. Oh dear. Well, Alan, they're saying the broadcast is slipping. Alan, fix it! Alan! I put Alan on the job, and hopefully that will help. In any case, if you know anything about this Abyssal Storm, you are strongly encouraged to coordinate efforts to understand this process. We have one of these abyss holes that's opened up in Montreal. We have a team of experts that's going in. And if New York feels a little too dangerous for you, and you're interested in learning more about the abyssal phenomena, now would be an excellent time to visit Montreal. We'll be allowing researchers, and those who wish to defend the researchers, access to the phenomena that's taking place in Seinneville. So if you could contact the Office of the Prince shortly through my Alan, we'll be encouraging persons interested in this research phenomena to visit the city. So there you have it. There's two big occasions for you to participate in. There's the carnage in New York, which, well, to the best of the intel that's been provided by the Anarchs, is an extreme threat on the part of the Sabbat, but as the story evolves, appears to contain apostate Sabbat, regular Sabbat, werewolves, potentially hunters, an extreme blood shortage, and a great risk to the Masquerade. And there's an abyssal storm bearing down, I don't know the full extent of it, but I understood the West Coast has also been hit by it. So you have two opportunities to go exploring. If you're of a more occult leaning, or into a more straightforward adventure, perhaps... I don't really understand what the Abyss is either. Primogen Archer just asked. Apparently it's a dark, black, void hole place where the Lasombra get their wiggly things from. The Lasombra claimed that that's the origin of the beast, and it's the hungry darkness within all of us. I don't personally believe that. I talk to my beast a lot, and I wouldn't describe her as being this big black wiggly thing. I would describe my beast as being a manifestation of my blood through the parts of myself that feel undernourished. We have a prestigious member of the Independent Alliance who's expressed an interest in purchasing werewolves. Or should I say werewolf blood and werewolf parts. It looks like we've got a bidding war going on. This is amazing, and I do believe that's something that I will need to make sure the information of is transmitted. Anyway, the incident in Seinneville has quite disrupted some of my travel plans. I was planning on visiting New York until it exploded into chaos, and I'd still love to do Vegas for the new year, but we're going to have to make sure that we deal with the small issue of face-eating zombies in an affluent suburb in Montreal. So, if you're interested in studying an abyssal phenomena, this month is a great time to pay a visit. Do send in those hospitality requests as soon as possible so I can give you priority processing. Montreal experiences a regular stream of visitors, and although we're a little more chaotic than some domains, we have very popular kindred tourism, and as an underpopulated domain, well, being one of the largest cities in Canada, we're the second largest next to Toronto, which is also a war zone. Very funny that. All the major cities in Canada are war zones. Even Vancouver apparently has little surprises from the Sabbat buried deep under its streets. I know, when I think Canada, the first thing that pops into my head is clearly there'd be a death cult of fanatic vampires who believe in everything but humanity. Clearly the place in North America with the lowest murder rate is exactly where I'd hide the Sabbat. No one would suspect. But yes, if you're interested in the slightly less controversial action of punching zombies, then that will be available. And for those of you who are wondering if you're going to miss out on something, don't worry. We'll be posting this later so you can watch it at your leisure and catch up on the information. And, whoops. In addition to that, I'll be uploading this to our Masquerade Safe Secure Media channel so that you'll be able to follow up with it. That sound okay? So for those of you who are joining the stream late, I'll provide you with the recap. New York is in absolute peril due to a rumble in Brooklyn between the Sabbat and the Anarchs attempting to protect their new home. This means that there's not only a spillover that's challenging the Masquerade, but a great deal of risk that this is going to attract both apostate Sabbat and hunters, and a confirmation of weaponized werewolves attacking vampires. The weaponized werewolves are not covered by the blood accords, being a completely different species, and for those of you who consider yourselves more mercantile, these are very worth going after, as there are prominent buyers within the Independent Alliance who would love to get a hold of the rare delicacy of werewolf blood, as well as their pelts, claws, and fangs. Do keep in mind that I've had it explained to me that werewolves are shape changers. Although I understand their blood remains potent when they're in human form, they're absolutely no use to you whatsoever as far as claws and teeth if they happen to be a person. But yes, I can put you in touch with Prince Ryder if you're of the Camarilla, or if you're a confused anarch and by some miracle outside of your communications network, I will pass you directly on to Advocate Youngblood, who is the anarch leader within Brooklyn. That's a very good question, Mr. Giovanni. He asked if there's any intel if the Brooklyn War is a prelude to the Sabbat trying to push the Anarchs statewide. In this particular complex situation, we're not even sure that this is the actual Sabbat. This may be one of the splinter groups. And as a result of being a splinter group, that means that they're in a position to basically run roughshod over everybody. So yes, this can be considered a first effort to test the Anarchs to find out if they can be shifted. If the Anarchs in New York manage to make a valiant effort, and the Camarilla can keep these two factions from cracking the Masquerade wide open, as well as shoring up our own defenses, because I guarantee that in the fog of war, a lot of things can be justified, and this would be exactly the sort of moment when even the Sabbat themselves would find a justification that, oh, well, this Camarilla observer was far too close to our battle zone, so maybe we just murdered them or kidnapped them and replaced them with a double. See, we're getting all sorts of useful information about these werewolves. And I can see that there's a great deal of bartering going on even in this thread. I'm glad that we're communicating. As I said, there's a possibility that this is actually apostate Sabbat, and if they're apostate Sabbat, that means that there's no guarantee about their behavior. For example, the apostate Sabbat of Montreal show a strong sign of being infernal. That is to say that those of them that we've dealt with have signed blood contracts that cause them to burst into flames upon violation of them. So if you care about our kind, or the Masquerade, or you're looking to gain glory within your clan, this is an excellent place where you can contribute, and I really advise you to reach out to Prince Ryder and see where you can be used within the war effort, or if you're an Anarch, to reach out towards Advocate Youngblood. Now, if you happen to be a member of the Independent Alliance, I don't need to tell you what to do. I'm sure you're going to find a profit in all sides of the conflict, because that's what you do. For those of you who are coming late, a very important Independent Alliance elder of Vegas has said that he is willing to pay top price for werewolf blood that you can harvest from this conflict. It's a valuable commodity. And in addition to this, for those of you in a more hierarchical clan, I know specifically my own Ventru have our own internal clan status, and possibly the Tremere, this is an excellent opportunity to test your capacity and war tactics. Yes. Dr. Archer of my clan is speaking specifically of the people who call themselves Paragons, a rather confusingly named cultist of werewolf worshippers. And yes, regardless of certain upsets in Montreal, there is usually a very strong relationship between the Camarilla and the Anarchs, reflecting our shared priorities in humanity. Even if we have different policies regarding liberty, personally I think freedom is a trap, and that freedom usually means freedom for the biggest, meanest vampire to hold you down and take all your things away from you before forcing you into a blood bond, or worse. Whereas the Anarchs are strong believers in libertas and how, with a little bit of support, everyone can enjoy freedom. We do agree that terrible pathbound weirdness and treating humanity like it's a toy is a very bad idea. So if you're interested in participating in helping New York, I will be following up with more detail about how you can get in on the proxy, which I mentioned a little bit earlier. Like I said, try not to overwhelm the poor VST because it's one guy and this may be several people, but this is the place to be at the end of 2017. So, it's really worth considering it if you have a character reason to go there to get involved, even just as an observer, just because this is probably the major conflict closing out the year. Hand over the head means out of character, by the way. And if you're looking for adventure, but something a little less global, and you're interested in researching the void phenomena, this particular case in Seinneville in Montreal is for you, and I look forward to entertaining your requests for hospitality so I can make you part of the team that will be exploring the void, either as an outside observer protecting the supernatural researchers, or as an alternative. Now that's my quick note for the evening, but if you're looking for more information, please don't hesitate to contact Alan. Alan, boot up the computer, they're going to be messaging you. And Alan will be able to give you more information on these matters. And of course, those people too prestigious to go through my life-sworn vassal may message me directly. That is, I'm willing to entertain elders of any sect, as is the protocol and manners, or persons holding court official positions of any sect, and Alan will be happy to direct anyone else. In other words, I'll talk to pretty much anyone. It's just that the nature of the roleplay means that my character can't realistically talk to a neonate from nowhere with no status. But on the other hand, I can still make sure you have the information for role-playing purposes. Well, I got asked about my opinion on paths. I think they're a terrible idea. Most people do not have the mental fortitude to be able to handle being on a path. There are some paths which, to the best of my knowledge, involve a higher moral sense, creating the possibility of doing less terrible things, but this tends to lead to people rapidly falling to the beast. And this is not a positive experience for most people, and there are a large number of paths that are completely incompatible with both the Masquerade and also with any sort of shared moral sense on the part of persons who are embracing humanity. Therefore, you end up with vampires who are morally incompatible with the majority of vampires, those sort of people who treat humans like ephemeral beings that can be pulled apart and damaged at will or for entertainment, or vivisected for educational purposes without a concern about their own moral weight. And as such, the Camarilla has decided that being on a path is an unsuitable behavior, and the Anarchs further do not support it. The Independent Alliance, of course, is very supportive of individuals being on a path, and many of their elders are, which is one of the main reasons why the Giovanni were unable to gain admittance into the Camarilla. Unfortunately, I don't believe most of them were willing to give up paths and certain avenues of unethical research, the way that the Tremere were willing to compromise and limit the infinite growth of their power in exchange for understanding that sometimes the greater good of all our kind, and not obviously drawing every single hunter from everywhere onto yourself, is valuable. And this is the same thing that played out with the Sabbat. As much as their complete abandonment of morals, humanity, ethics, and any kindness to the fragile, single lifespan beings that mostly populate our world, and from which we all draw origins from, gave them increased potency in war and made them formidable opponents, the side effect of this abandoning of humanity made them very endangered by hunters. And the moral of the story is that the lesson that we learned from the Inquisition is correct. You can't act like a crazed demigod who treats mortals like sweetmeats that you can devour at will, or flies you can pull the wings off of, or you will very rapidly find it's a limiting behavior on you. Anyway, I appreciate your joining me for this evening, and I will be posting this video later for your enjoyment if you missed out, and following up with anyone who sends me messages or inquiries, either through myself or through my life-sworn vassal, Alan. Ah yes, the study of death and the soul might be an honorable study, but as I pointed out, the average person who embarks upon a path is very unlikely to have the fortitude to survive this way, and more likely to end up rapidly falling to the beast because they see it as an easy way out, some way that allows them to do evil things whilst not suffering the predations of their own inner demon. My personal opinion is to do one crime at a time. As a result of being an immortal, all-powerful, beloved, and beautiful creature that transcends the limitations of being a mere mortal woman, I have a little demon that lives in my head and tells me to kill everyone and constantly tells me that I'm put upon and hard done by and I need to do evil things. So I'm not going to give it any ammunition because I don't really fancy ending up turning into a mindless sociopath that just lives for immediate gratification. I mean, I love to be gratified. There's a lot of pleasures out there that I enjoy, but I can't have fun tomorrow if I don't take care of my moral sense today. And that's always how I thought about it. I mean, it's easier if you're a Ventru or one of the pillar clans of the Camarilla because we don't experience limitations on ourselves. It's a little more challenging if you're, say, a Sombra, because I understand that true exploration of the full range of their natural powers means abandoning humanity, but some people have to make sacrifices. So, that ends the evening conversation, and I repeat that I thoroughly encourage any of you who care about our kind or looking to enrich yourself with the potential of glory and recognition either on behalf of the Anarchs or within the Camarilla to consider New York as an option, and those curious scholars wishing to learn more about a void phenomena to come to Montreal. And I hope you have a lovely evening. In our next little communication, I'll tell you a little bit more about how Ventru operate, Dignitas, and what it means to you. You all have a lovely evening. Bisous!